Hundreds of murder cases statewide unsolved. Killers who haven't been caught, victims' families waiting decades for answers and justice.
That's why we're launching Deadline, a new cold case series shedding light on these stories. News 9's licensed investigator, Lisa Monahan, takes a deeper look into the deadly stabbing of a Comanche mother in tonight's Deadline.
Last call, you need anything else?
Mary Pewitt, the newest waitress at Harold's Club, declared last call, never suspecting she would soon take her last breath.
Last call.
The 25-year-old accepted the job 13 days earlier. The bar wasn't Mary's first choice of careers, but money was tight and she had daughters to feed.
She was trying to, provide for us the best that she could.
It was Friday, and the single mom, kid-free for the night, was working the late shift. At midnight, Mary promptly closed the lone bar in Comanche, Oklahoma. After delivering the night's earnings to the owner's house, she headed to her home on South 10th Street. Mary was expecting someone. At dawn the next day, Mary's mother, Elizabeth Morgan, was on her doorstep with 6-year-old Amber and 7-year-old Kyra. They'd arranged for the early morning drop-off.
We went and knocked on the door and nobody answered. And then Amber went up to the window.
She peeked through the blinds and quickly cried out for help.
She said my mom's all covered in blood.
They found a way in and ran to Mary's side. Blood was everywhere, but there was a glimmer of hope.
I can remember my grandma saying she's still warm.
First responders rushed to the home, but there was no saving Mary. Someone savagely attacked her, police believe, between 12:45 and 6 a.m. June 4th. She'd been stabbed 30 times in the neck and chest, and from the small cuts on her arms and hands, it appeared she tried to fight off her attacker.
It's a killing that was full of rage.
Evidence of a struggle began in the living room, led to the hallway and into the room where Mary was found on her bed, wearing only a t-shirt and socks. The autopsy showed no signs of a sexual assault, but the brutality suggested the killing was personal. Mary most likely died at the hands of someone she knew, but who and why?
She had a lot of people in her life, so it makes it really hard to narrow down our pool of possible suspects.
At 25, Mary had already been involved in several volatile relationships, 3 failed marriages, and had a new quick-tempered boyfriend. The men provided loose alibis, but authorities were never able to make an arrest.
It just feels like it's been stuck for so long. She was just an ordinary person. She wasn't someone famous. She was just a mom.
Over a span of several months, I made calls, reviewed reports, and spoke with anyone who had first-hand knowledge of the murder.
I'm hoping to talk with Chief Straley.
Hold on just a minute, and I'll have him meet you here, okay?
Beginning with Comanche police, who handled the initial investigation.
Everything I had, OSBI requested, and I turned it over to them.
Stevens County also turned over its case material when the OSBI took over in 1997, by law making that information off limits to the public. So I dug through every available document and interviewed any witnesses still alive and willing to talk.
Our bedroom faced her house, and we had a dog that was a half Doberman, half German Shepherd. And we heard him barking around 10:30. And they did find footprints.
I tried revisiting the crime scene, but the home's renters had no interest in cooperating.
Oh, she's right there.
Still, I made note of the entry points, recalling a key piece of circumstantial evidence, that the house had been secured after the murder. Windows shut, front door locked, and the side door held together by a bungee cord still intact, suggesting the killer likely knew how to get in, knew the home, and knew Mary. The evidence, while far from conclusive, points to 3 possible scenarios: a crime of passion, drug retribution, or murder for hire. One popular theory points to Randy Benson, Mary's boyfriend, who we know was in the home that night. When questioned by police, Benson claimed after Mary got home from work, they watched TV together until 12:45 a.m., at which point he left to go play video games with his 11-year-old son. But that doesn't match the story he shared more recently with Mary's daughter, Kyra.
My son promised me be here at midnight, and I promised him I would, and I left Mary's at 11:50 and sped home and got home at exactly midnight.
Wow.
And that account doesn't fit with the timeline of Mary's movements that night. We mapped out her route home to be sure.
Head south on North 7th Street.
By all accounts, she left Harold's at midnight, drove to the boss's house, and came here. I'm sure there are more stop signs, there are more businesses. That would have put her here by 12:15 if she left when the bar closed, and he told Kyra that he left at 11:50, but he told police that he left after midnight.
I was young when it all happened, and it was so long ago, I don't remember a whole lot of it.
We hoped Benson's now grown son could help clarify. He was spending the weekend at his grandmother's in Duncan, where his father was also staying at the time.
Did you play video games with your father that night?
I'm not going to go into all that. The statement that was written down for me matched verbatim what I guess my grandmother and Randy had also said. So he said it seemed a little off.
Benson's son wouldn't say anything more about that, but did offer this cryptic statement.
I don't know if you remember old Nintendos or not, but almost all of them are one-player games.
Was that his way of saying the video game alibi was bogus? Of course, we would have posed this question to Benson himself, but he took the answer with him to his grave in 2020.
Is he capable of it? Yeah, probably. Circumstantially, certainly the evidence seems to be there.
We tracked down people who knew Randy after the murder, but were unaware of his potential connection to this case. Tune in tomorrow night at 10 to hear why they say he was acting suspicious. Plus, we explore a handful of other theories, motives, and persons of interest connected to Mary's murder.
Continuing the first investigation in our new Unsolved Murder series, Deadline. Last night we told you about Comanche mother Mary Morgan Pewitt, who was brutally stabbed 30 times in her home on June 4th, 1988.
We also introduced you to one of the persons of interest in her death, boyfriend Randy Benson. That's where licensed investigator Lisa Monahan picks up tonight's Deadline.
Is he capable of it? Yeah, probably. Circumstantially, certainly the evidence seems to be there.
We tracked down people who knew Randy Benson after the murder, but were unaware of his potential connection to this case. In hindsight, some say his behavior was suspicious.
Say things like, he goes, I just want to kill that.
He was crass.
Very crass. Very crass. And in fact, in terms of what we know in 2022 in terms of behavior, very misogynistic. No doubt about that.
Clear evidence of that was captured in a comment Benson made about an ex-girlfriend in that recorded phone conversation with Mary's daughter.
She's just been driving me crazy.
Uh-oh.
Because I'm not going to kill her or nothing, but I would like to punch her.
Benson always maintained his innocence, but there's one other bit of circumstantial evidence against him. The fact that Mary was found with no underwear on. What happened to them? Were they overlooked, or did her killer take them as a souvenir? Those who knew him say Benson often made random, crude remarks about ladies' underwear, collected them even. And apparently he wasn't the only one. While searching records on Deems Rowell, another person of interest, I found this.
They accused you of stealing her panties. What was that all about?
In 2017, a woman claimed Rowell hit her, pushed her, and threatened to kill her. The protective order further stated she found a pair of her dirty underwear on a hanger in his closet. He denies it.
What are you guilty of?
Well, I'm guilty of being a fool.
Rowell has a violent criminal history that includes kidnapping, assault, and a second-degree murder exoneration. In one case, he's accused of cutting a woman on her back, which is noteworthy given how Mary was killed.
I've never cut anybody. Now, I collect knives. I did then.
His knife collection has never been tested for evidence, but Rouse says investigators have searched his home, collected his DNA, and given him a polygraph test, which he failed.
Yeah, they've always tried to blame me for...
Since investigators have his DNA and Rouse never been arrested for the murder, it would seem the sample ruled him out, or OSBI hasn't run it. We don't know for sure because the investigation is sealed. Either way.
Did you kill Mary?
No.
Rouse says his only connection to Mary is that they ran in the same drug circles.
Do you know who killed Mary?
Have no idea, ma'am. I can't tell you his name.
You know the name, or you don't know the name?
Yeah, I know him.
You just won't tell me.
Ryland Miller. You heard that name?
Yes, I have.
Yes, you have. Yeah, they were investigating him, I think Don Allen Jr.
I pressed him for a possible motive.
The cocaine. I think because she was dealing that cocaine and she got dead.
In the drug gang retribution theory, Mary was supposedly dealing out of the Harold's Club. She'd been caught skimming off the top, couldn't pay it back, and was killed as punishment. Following leads, we tracked down Ryland Miller, a convicted drug trafficker in the area. He never answered the door, but he did answer the phone.
I was trying to help, and they started acting, putting my name like I'm a suspect. There's no way that I would be that.
Ryland vehemently denied working for the local drug ring and instead pointed us to Don Allen Jr., who's been convicted numerous times for drug possession and trafficking in Oklahoma and Texas. Don Jr. has been under suspicion because he made a drug run to Texas with Mary around the time of her death.
Hello?
Don?
Yes?
Hi, Don. This is Lisa Monahan with News 9 in Oklahoma City, and I'd like to ask you a few questions if you have a moment.
Okay.
Did anything go wrong during that drug deal?
No,
Would there be any reason that someone would want her dead related to the drug deal?
No, She didn't know nothing about it.
Don Jr. says he brokered the deal. Mary and a group of unknown men went along for the ride. They brought the drugs back to Oklahoma and then allegedly went separate ways.
Where were you the night of her murder?
I was in Eureka.
Doing what?
I don't even remember.
I asked him point blank.
Did you have any involvement in Mary's murder?
None whatsoever. I took a polygraph test to prove my innocence.
Don Jr. says his DNA is also on file. In fact, there are samples for nearly everyone under suspicion. Don Jr. is the brother of Mary's second husband, Tim Allen, who was in a tumultuous child custody battle with Mary. He refused to talk with us.
I'm at work right now.
Would you be willing to visit with me about it?
No.
I'd like your ex-wife's murder remains unsolved.
Tim and his second wife, Lynn, were accused in several violent assaults on Mary, which piqued investigators' interest early in the investigation. Kyra says the worst fight occurred 2 weeks before the murder.
I saw Lynn put away something, which I believe to be a weapon of some sort. And Tim had kind of backed her into a corner, and she reached for an ice pick and she stabbed him.
Could Mary's brutal murder with a knife, thrust dozens of times into her upper torso and face, been Tim's revenge? Or possibly the dirty work of someone Tim hired? To explore the murder for hire theory, I started digging deeper into the child custody agreement. Turns out Tim was ordered to pay thousands of dollars to Mary from his workers' comp settlement. Adding to the suspicion, Mary's parents told investigators the night of the murder, Tim called to ask if their girls would be staying with them for the night. Tim and Lynn were each other's alibi. After Mary died, they got the kids and half of Mary's estate. Investigators took their initial statements and more recently requested they submit DNA. They refused and hired a lawyer.
The Allens, of course, want this solved. They want it solved, but not at their expense. And they want people off their back. They want it to stop people looking at them thinking they might be suspects. They want it solved, but they don't have anything to offer to help the OSBI solve it.
DNA could help rule them out if investigators collected and, more importantly, preserved evidence from the crime scene.
They just didn't take care of it like they should have.
Mary Pewitt, a former Comanche police officer, remembers distinctly investigators collecting cigarette butts, beer cans, hair, and more from the scene.
They let anybody and everybody see everything.
It's also personal to Larry. His brother Stanley was Mary's estranged husband. He says Stanley was often physically violent. She wanted out, he didn't. By all accounts, Stanley had several ties to this case, but was allegedly in jail the night of the murder. He's since passed, so has time, answers, and perhaps even evidence.
One of the obstacles with dealing with old evidence is how much you have left. It does take it away a little bit, eventually where we might not have anything left. So we have to be really careful.
Investigators say work is going on behind the scenes at the OSBI to solve this case.
It's not too late to speak up. You know, it may be just the missing piece, just to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
On Deadline, Lisa Monahan, Oklahoma's own News 9.